you got your like automatic replies when you want to like cancel a call. It's like, can I call you later? That one. It's like the standard iPhone one. I kept getting that one.
I'm on a call. I'll call you back.
And then I'm like, okay. And so then the next day, can I call you later? Question mark. Okay. Then the third time, I didn't even get that. I didn't even get the text back to say I'll call you later.
Well, listen.
I'm gonna call you Tuesday. That's what I'm gonna do.
People are busy now. They're busy. They got lots of things to do. They don't get to make the decisions. Decisions have to go up the ladder.
I don't even want the decision. I just wanted to say, hey, how are you? What's going on? How's life?
We're gonna look at it. We're gonna look at it next week. We'll get back.
What's going on?
People take a long time.
We got things going on.
They don't want to jump. They don't want to make it seem like they like it so
just got
much.
one thing going on at one time, Darryl. You know that. Got a million. I don't even know how many things. I can't even count all the things I got going on right now.
TK, it's a crazy market, right?
Is it?
Is it not?
I think it's a pretty average spring market. We're selling lots of properties.
Average
I had a good
spring market.
This week I had a property for sale in a nice upscale neighborhood, and we priced it low because pricing it low is in this neighborhood what you do. The last one got a really great number using a certain pricing strategy, so we were like, hey, let's do it, even though we knew that there were some things that made our property less valuable for like anybody. And so we got a few offers, and the highest offer, I can't really say what it is, but it was like hundreds of thousands of dollars over asking. And the seller was like, I need to think about it.
I need to think about it.
I need a long weekend to think about it. Give me like 5 more days.
Hold on, but did you do the like bullshit super low price to bring everybody in, and you're over asking of that much doesn't really mean anything?
It was like 150 grand more than I think it would have sold for otherwise. Like we got more than the majority of other properties that had sold, but there was one that was like way above everyone else, but it was like a couple months ago. I mean, the market was different. I heard they got 10 offers, we only had 4. So, definitely that property was more demand for that area.
But last week you were telling us a different story. You were saying like, I don't care what the numbers say. I look at this house and I say, why can't I get the same as that? And you get less.
I'm telling the exact same story.
What do you mean? You just said
2 months ago, the offer, the house price that sold, again, this is super anecdotal, but the house price is 13% higher than the offer I was able to get. The last sale.
The last sale was 13% higher.
Prices didn't go down 13%. There's other reasons, but basically very similar homes in the same neighborhood. The offer that I was able to procure was 13% lower than that top sale.
Still got 2 million over asking, and you were 13% under the last sale. How does that work?
Asking. Oh. Then the other ones that I was comparing to, which were also in the last few months,
isn't that weird?
We were potentially a better lot. Maybe that's why we got more money than it was about $150,000 to $200,000 more. Regardless, the whole point of the story is not that. The whole point of the story is that it's an emotional decision. The seller's like, family home, long time, owned it for a long time. We don't just want to give it away and sell it and, make a bad decision here. So let's just take the long weekend. We got to go to the cottage. We got things to do. Let's pick this up next week.
We're going to think about it. So does that mean that they didn't quite get where they were hoping that they would get? Because they were hoping they'd get the same?
They definitely got a number that they're happy with. Definitely got a number that they're happy with.
Definitely got a number they're happy with, but still need the weekend to think about it because they're not sure about some of the terms that are in there, or what?
No, it's just strictly emotional. He gave me a few logical answers, and I kind of handled them all, and I said, well, A, B, C, and he's like, really? It's just an emotional decision. Have you ever sold a home that you've grown up in, Darryl?
Personally?
Yeah. Did your parents pass away in the home that you grew up in?
No, I watched my parents sell their house, though.
But you didn't have to make that decision.
No,
it's an emotional decision for people.
It would have been way sooner.
It's an emotional decision for people to sell the family home they grew up in.
I suppose so.
It's not easy. Yeah.
But what does the emotional part have to do with the story? Just the need to make that final decision. Like, we decided to sell, we decided to list, we decided to get the house ready to sell, we decided to invite all these people into our house, we decided to have probably an open house, at least one, I'm assuming.
No, open houses. We don't do open houses.
No, so just showings throughout the week while you're holding back offers, and then they take all these offers, and then they're like, what, you know,
we need more time.
We just want to think about it
want to get into real estate.
bit longer.
And you guys all want to get into real estate. You're like, oh yeah, real estate's so easy.
Shit show.
No problem.
Jesus Christ.
No problem. All you got to do. I got to meet with another lady tonight who's, you know, been on the market for a while. The showings aren't happening anymore. I crushed it last year for the same house. Like I knocked it out of the freaking park for 2 doors down. And so she always looked at that and was like, wow, that's, you know, what I can get. And those results are really hard to replicate. So now she tried to go another way with another agent, didn't work, called us afterwards and said, all right, let's try to do this. And I explained to her, one, that those results were extreme, two, that the market's not where it was back then, regardless of how good those results were. So we've been sitting on the market for 2 months, and I've given her all the right advice. We've received offers at prices that reflect true market value, and she's just not having it. So we're going to go talk to her tonight, Darryl, and I'm going to give her the old, you know, one direction or the other speech, because really and truly that's what she's got to do. She either just needs to take it off the market or, you know, listen to what the market's telling her. I'm just a messenger here, you know?
And so what if she decides not to listen to the market and just wants to keep it out there? And, you know, maybe somebody's going to eventually
look, as long as I'm not lying to her and telling her a story on, you know, maybe someone will just come through and they'll just love the way that your door you know, glimmers in the sun, and that, you know, this brand new house that's never been lived in, that looks just like all the other houses in the neighborhood, stands out. You know,
it's a new subdivision house.
A new subdivision,
yeah. This
built a couple years ago, like, but she just never moved in, so it's still brand new.
Layers to the story.
But she bought it in like 2019 or something like that. Like, it's like the price she paid is way lower than what it's worth now.
That's good. So you don't hear that.
She's not in one of those. She's not in like the 2022 new home construction people situation. Her house is worth like 50% more than she bought it for, maybe 40-something percent.
Look at that jump, eh? From 2019 to now, including the crash, the great crash of 2022, which nobody seems to realize even happened. Like, do you remember? I was talking about
short-lived.
But I was talking a few months ago going, guys, like, why is everybody calling for the crash? We had the crash. The crash came. We're 20, 30% down. It's not enough, right? It wasn't a big enough crash. It was only 30% in some places, 20% in others. Now people are starting to talk about it. Now they're starting to go, hey, look, we crashed. Maybe good times are ahead. I don't even know what anybody wants.
Darryl, we're still trending downwards. I don't care what anyone says. It's just a really slow process.
Trending downwards slowly.
Yep. If you're looking to have a quick chat about real estate or anything else on your mind, or you just want a free t-shirt, check out the Calendly link below. Book a call with me. Talk to you soon.
And if you got anything out of this video, just give us a little subscribe, maybe a little like. How about give us a comment, a little comment?
Yes. Everyone here should be subscribing. Click that bell. Click that bell.
Really?
There's just less and less buyers, more and more sellers.
Way more sellers, it seems.
Depreciation.
Right?
That's the way it goes.
That's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
Geniuses in hindsight here at the Canadian Real Estate Show, because I'm pretty sure we were not so bright as things were starting to come apart. Not I'm like getting used this to the whole, guy.
I'm getting used to the whole doom and gloom story.
It's doom and gloom, especially if you check out Mark's Twitter posts lately. I guess you're still not on Twitter. What's going on, Mark? Mark was our most viewed episode of all time.
My Jewish mother remains proud.
Does she remain proud? Did she
put it on a little business card? She tells her friends at supper parties. It's all good.
This is your claim to fame. Other than, I mean, somehow you made the roster on the Rare modeling website. How did that happen?
Like that? You like that?
Wow.
Wasn't that nice?
I
It's
saw
because
the original picture and now I've seen the new one, and man,
I got a particularly nice haircut, and the photographers from Rare, they're like, we're capturing that, and there it is. Now it's up there. What can I
now
do?
it's up there. Mark
I see his
is
names everywhere. I saw in my office yesterday at the Remax West office. There was just like, on the TV screen, all of a sudden I looked over and there's Mark's face and his name. You're everywhere.
Hey, listen, whatever I'm doing, it's working. What can I tell you?
Yeah.
The way I make money is by having my face everywhere. So that just
It's
makes
a
me
good
very.
strategy.
It's a good
good
way to become
Proven,
strategy.
it's a proven strategy.
Weird that it worked, but anyways, let's move on from that quickly.
Honestly, it would have been a better thing 20 years ago, but now I'm approaching 50, so this is the face y'all have to put up with. What can I tell you?
Just save those photos, for 20 years from now
Absolutely.
when it still looks the same.
Keep those ones from the Rare website, because
take
somehow
the real
they
estate
managed,
agent
they managed to make
strategy.
you look like a movie star.
How are you guys?
Long weekend.
Fantastic. Is it a long weekend?
Yep.
It is. Thank the Lord it's a long weekend. Oh my
Thank the Lord. Why? Did you have a rough week, Mr. Morris?
I've had a rough couple of months actually. Like it's it's so interesting to be a real estate lawyer these days, because I feel like the rest, all of our associated professionals, usually we kind of work in a bunch, right? Like we have the mortgage brokers, we have the real estate agents, we have all of these people who kind of surround us and dialogue with us. And usually what one of us experiences, all of us experience, right? Like, oh, there's a market shift, or it's going up, it's going down, whatever it is. But I feel very lonely these days as a lawyer, because there's an acute source of pain in the market that we are stuck dealing with, that realtors don't see, that mortgage brokers don't see. And that's people who are failing to close new builds. Those people who are failing to close, a lot of people have given up. They're just not working with mortgage brokers. They're certainly not dealing with real estate agents. That's been done. And so we are spending countless hours these days dealing with the acute form of pain that exists in the market, which is unfortunately, people who are not able to close new builds. And that's just getting worse as 2026 approaches, because, we're 5 year in the condo world, at least, 5 years from the peak of market means, 2020, 2021 has 2026 being when the people were paying the highest premiums for prices. Market hasn't caught up to it. Appraisals are failing across the board, except through blanket appraisals, which who knows how long that's going to actually last. And as a result, you just have a lot of people who are struggling, in pain, crying at your office, defaulting every day. And yet, the resale market continues apace. So like from a realtor's perspective, yeah, there might be a decline in the market here and there, but they're not seeing that acute sense of pain. So what is it like being a lawyer these days? It's actually exhausting, because you go from your normal work of just taking in your files and processing to the invariable, like every day, once or twice a day, someone on the phone in tears, defaulting. What do I do? How do I get a mutual release? You can't get a mutual release. Oh God, what am I going to do? What does the litigation look like? And we're spending countless hours doing it. I'm not alone in this. It's every real estate lawyer is now experiencing this reality, and it's a tough one.
And so when they default, meaning they can't close on the unit when they're supposed to, are these developers working with them, or are they just sinking their teeth in? And
no, I don't. The developers aren't working with. So that it's an interesting question. You would think the developers are working with them, but they aren't. And the reason they aren't is because of market condition more than anything else. You see, right now, we're 20% down from peak. That's where we are. 20% happens to be the deposits that they actually have, which means the builders are still able to be made whole by simply ignoring the pleas of people saying, please work with me, please give me a vendor take back. They do in some cases, but please give me a vendor take back, please reduce price, please whatever. The vendor says, screw it, I'm just going to take the deposit, on average, I'm going to resell. I already have your 20% down, because that's what the standard deposit is on a new build. I'll be made whole. Where the builders will start experiencing some pain is if things start falling below 20%, which invariably we are going to see more and more of as the prices rise on the other end, because we're approaching the 2021 product coming to close. Mm-hmm. So we're really at a tipping point. Right now, we're not at a point where the builders are suffering loss because of their 20% premiums or deposits. I think we'll be hitting that point soon. it is the case that statistically defaults are definitely up. But when I say that, that shouldn't cause mass panic because they're coming up from like a very, very, very low amount. So if I say there's 100% increase in defaults, that may mean 2 defaults per project as opposed to 1, right? And that's still 100% increase. So the percentage increase is a bit misleading because we were starting from a very low figure, but we're seeing it track steadily upwards. And it's only a matter of time till we hit a tipping point, till sustained long-term high interest rates combined with real estate values that are no longer going up, combined with rising prices predicated upon closing projects from 2021 are starting to hit the shelf. You know, all of these pressures become cumulative until you have a tipping point. And, you know, you can kind of see it forming. You can kind of see the swell starting. And certainly lawyers are in the mix on an individual basis. We're just kind of every single day having these discussions, but it's not systemic yet. It's not creating systemic problems yet. It just has the potential for systemic problems. And it's something I'm keeping a close eye on.
It's just these individuals who are obviously losing a lot of money. And it's similar right now. The talk is, I'm hearing this from different people. They're like, well, mortgage delinquencies are up 71% from last year. And I'm like, yeah, but they're still like well below like pre 2016 numbers. Like we didn't have any issues back in 2013, 14, 15, 16, and the rates were much higher then. So we're really not in any issues. Like I have clients calling me who are in trouble, but because the resale market's doing not so bad, they've got options just to sell and to be able to move on, or they got equity or whatever. So are you getting those calls too? Not on the pre-con side, but on the mortgage delinquency side?
Mortgage delinquencies, not so much. Well, power of sales are up, right? Like power of sales are up. Just
up from what though?
Well, no, I agree.
Record lows. Yeah.
And it's like new builds. It's like new builds. Someone just says percentage increase. You know, it doesn't mean that the sky is falling. It just means, look, they're tracking up. And eventually, if things keep on tracking up, it has a sustainable hit. I don't know what the actual numbers are, but I'm seeing more and more power of sales hit my office. And that's a decisive trend. But these are power of sales. Power of sales are things, and particularly lenders that have found themselves in problems, are not as acute as the pain that we're experiencing in new build, particularly because most people who are in the position of suffering from a mortgage crunch, A, have had significant value increase over time. B, can still sell. And most of them don't have more mortgages than equity. That is to say, they can still exit their position, and the market hasn't crashed. The market is liquid at a price point. It's not like no one is buying. It's that people are buying at a price point. So the exit ability is still there. Having said that, it is common knowledge amongst agents and lawyers both that more and more files are hitting our office that we haven't seen in 10, 15 years. Files where agents haven't checked title. Listing agents should always be checking title, right, TK? You know that. Listing agents haven't checked title, and when they give it to the lawyer, suddenly the lawyers find out, oh crap, there are more mortgages. When you combine the commissions and the mortgages, there's not enough equity in the property on the sale. We never had that before because, of course, a rising market floats all boats. We are seeing that frequently now. So I'm not saying to you again that this is a systemic problem. I'm not trying to cause mass panic. I'm saying these are the individual factors that we are now facing at our office. And it's not just us. Every lawyer is facing them. They are becoming regular occurrences. When they become systemically problematic is anyone's guess. They certainly are not yet, particularly with the liquid market and everything else, but they're warning signs. It's kind of like, you know, the green light is no longer on. It's now flashing orange a bit. It's not red. It's just flashing orange saying like, hey, something is happening. Can someone please monitor this? That's where we are in the process, in my opinion.
And so the people that are defaulting in the condo market and the people that are having issues in the resale market, are these investors for the most part, or like what are you seeing? Who's defaulting?
Yeah. You know, that's an interesting factor. So anyone who's been in the Toronto market knows that anytime a project was released, 80% of these things would sell out right away. You'd have people around the block. But what were they buying, guys? What were they buying? And you know this, TK. You know this, Darryl. You're aware of what they were buying. They were all buying the smallest, cheapest unit possible every single time. Those are the ones that would fly off the shelves. You made it 300 square feet. Great. Where's the 280? I'll take that.
They hoped that they were actually buying the piece of paper for the cheapest unit in the building. They did not consider closing on this for the most
Yes,
part,
but more importantly, they didn't consider living there because none of the people who were buying it were actual end users. They
well,
were
who
all
would consider
investors.
living in these fucking
Right.
things, right? Like, it's
So,
really
well,
crazy.
well, no one would, but everyone would consider buying them so long as they go up. Now, here's the interesting thing. We have therefore, through demand, created condo product that are nothing more than washrooms in a sky with perhaps a small little room. And the real question to me in condo land is what happens to these ridiculously small units, which were incredibly valuable so long as capital kept on increasing, so long as real estate values kept on increasing. Well, they're no longer doing that. My personal take on real estate is that the way we get out of the problem we're in is that it just plateaus for many years and inflation basically catches up. That's where we are. It's not going to crash, not going to go up. It's going to plateau. Interest rates are not going to change very much. This is my personal take. Ron, by the way, disagrees with me wholeheartedly. I tried to get him to bet 200. Yeah, I tried to bet him. I tried to bet him $200, and he was like, "No, 10,000." I said,
I wish.
Ron, $200. I'm gonna give you $200 on this. He's like, I don't bet for less than 10,000. I'm like, who am I dealing with?
This is the thing.
He's got his face in more places than you do, clearly. So
I wish I took the bet though. Like, I do picture a day in the future where I'm very upset that I didn't take that bet, because I truly believe, and TK thinks I'm just stirring the shit, but I really can't imagine rate cuts like in this environment at all. I don't see any reason for rate cuts right now if we're actually trying to save the economy here.
Well, a rate cut, I think, is what I bet Ron, what I was trying to bet Ron, but I eventually ended up placing my $200 with Jeremy. The bet that I have with Jeremiah now is that there will be a decline of a quarter point between now and May of next year, but only a quarter point.
May of next year. Okay, now we're getting crazy here.
What does that quarter point even
what
do?
The fuck,
a
quarter point by May next year. That's a useless.
Why are they
bet.
even teasing us to do that?
What?
Well, the reason, I'll tell you why. It's because Canada's economy has now revolved almost exclusively around real estate. And so everyone in your orbit, everyone in my orbit discusses real estate, real estate, real estate. But we forget Canada's fundamentals, which is that we are tied to a behemoth south of us. And that behemoth has an agenda that doesn't consider Canadian real estate bubbles, nor do they care about us at all. And they're flying. Their economy is flying. They're doing really, really, really well. They have low unemployment rates. And quite frankly, there is huge pressure on maintaining interest rates where it is. Remember, Canada's exports and oil and gas still constitute a fundamental part of this country. Oil and gas and other exports are predicated upon this interest rate too. And our interest rate becomes an international interest rate when we consider our exports. And so it's all well and good that we're sitting there looking at the housing market going, there has to be some relief. But remember, the Bank of Canada considers more than just interest rates and Ontario's housing market in that decision. It's a major component now, for sure, because we're all wrapped up in a bubble of crap. But there's other factors that need to be considered. And because of that, when looking at the global economics and when looking at the fact that Canadians are still jumping at the bit to create more real estate bubble, which is another factor. The moment the interest rates go down, people are still primed to jump in and create the same problem. It leads me to believe 100%. That we're not going to have a substantive reduction over the course of this year. Now, there's two other factors that need to be considered, which I'm not good at assessing because I've given you a market analysis. But there is very seriously a political analysis too. Both countries, Canada and the US, are about to go through elections. Both have very close calls. Not in Canada's case. Canada's going to be the Liberals are going to be wiped off the map, but they're still going to try. They're going to try every arsenal in their book, which may include something to do with interest rates. The Americans are going to be governed by political decision making as well as we head into next year. So there is that factor separate and apart from everything else. But fundamentally, politics kind of comes and goes, and the fundamental economic pressures of these countries are what maintain the true interest rate over time. And I just don't see much of a reduction in interest rate over time, despite what your favorite TikToker is telling you about the great prospects coming our way in form of interest rate relief over the coming years.
Speaking about fake news, so there was a big story about how tenants will have to pay their foreign landlords tax bills, right? And that there was like one case that happened where the guy happened to have to pay it. So now everyone's going, oh my gosh, withhold 25% of your rent. So if you got a foreign landlord and all that kind of stuff, and then the government just comes out.
Is that fake news?
Yeah, they're just like, what are you talking about? We're not collecting money from any tenants. There's just one case that happened. But of course, people hang on to whatever bit of headline news they can get.
It's always been the law that you had to withhold 25%. Technically, if you go, let me just put this out there. Yeah. I bought my PS5 from some dude out of the back of his truck at a Shoppers Drug Mart at 1 a.m. in the morning. I did. He was
an authorized distributor.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Because PS5s were hard to get, and he had it. And I paid him cash.
You can get weed on every corner now, but a PS5, you need the back alley at 1 in the morning.
It was hard. So technically, I had to pay HST on that. And technically, because you have to pay HST on everything that's not exempt. And technically, I had to ask him for a statutory declaration stating that he was a non-resident of Canada. And if he stated that he was a non-resident, I would have to withhold 25% and remit it to the federal government. Technically, that's the law, right? Yeah. Now, good luck to me. I got my PS5 because I didn't do those things, but that's what the law is. And it was always the law that you had to do that for every payment, rental included. The CRA is a bunch of, I've just had to do taxes, so I'm not feeling particularly charitable towards these guys. Those
wait till you write the check.
Don't understand the repercussions of their policies. Stating this to one person and going after this one person has huge effect, because who's going to do that? A tenant is not empowered, particularly residential tenants. They're not empowered to act vis-a-vis a landlord and say, I'm withholding 25%. Good luck to you. Like, what are we? That's not a reality that any of us can abide by. And so the CRA has put us in an impossible position, because the law is residential, commercial, whatever it is, you have to withhold 25% if someone's a non-resident, which many people are, particularly in the investment communities. Practically no one's going to do it. And so the only relief here is going to be, there will be some form of interpretation bulletin exempting, I'm sure, very soon, residential rents from this obligation, because it just doesn't work. And I'm pretty sure in the commercial space, lawyers will work it out. If you're a sophisticated commercial, there'll be a way of working it out. It won't be an issue. So
not everything on TikTok
but it caused endless problems. This is just an example of government agencies running amok without thinking about the repercussions of their policies. And it's also an example of terrible legislation like that didn't contemplate the reality of its effect on all of us.
It's a 100-year-old law. And so basically they were saying that if there's some sort of business relationship between the tenant and the landlord, that's what this case was. I'm not sure exactly what it was. That's why the guy had like 6 years of this, 25% withholding tax to pay because of his landlord being a non-resident. But they were basically came out and said, like, we are not collecting, nor have we collected from anybody in the last 10 years, this type of withholding tax from any tenants.
Right. It's not a 100-year law. It's actually Section 116 of the Income Tax Act. It's called the Withholding Act legislation. It actually came about in the 70s, but we all deal with it. So if someone's a non-resident for residential sale, we actually withhold 25% or 50%. Actually, is what you're
part of the pre-printed APS.
That's the exact same law. That's exactly what's going on here. It's for every payment. It's not just for real estate payments. It's just practically we only deal with it for substantive issues, and rent was never seen as a substantive issue until the CRA decided in its infinite wisdom to make it one.
CRA and infinite wisdom. I love it. In the same sentence. There's enough of them out there. Did you see that report? There's like 60,000 employees in the CRA, and there's 70,000 in the IRS. And there's a little bit of a population difference between the two countries, but but that doesn't mean that our numbers are off in the wrong way. It might also be that the Americans are off in the wrong way. Remember that there is an actual political movement that when they get into power, when the Republicans get into power, they cut the IRS significantly for political reasons. And that's not to say, by the way, that Canada doesn't have way too many people working for the CRA. Frankly, the amount of government expansion that took place in the past 3 or 4 years should be enough to make anyone sick. Across the government, period. The amount of government contracts,
don't even get me started. Like the fact that we've actually extended third-party contracts through the moon at endless cost to the taxpayer, whilst at the same time massively expanding the civil service. I mean, like there's just been no oversight to the process over the past several years. I don't know what happened in COVID, but we lost control totally of contracting, hiring, and everything else. But it doesn't in any way mean that in the States, there isn't an opposite and equally problematic tendency to cut vital services like the IRS. In fact, it's very easy, particularly if you are in the 1%, to avoid paying the taxes due and owing because the IRS simply doesn't have the regulators for it. So the happy medium is probably, as always is the case, probably somewhere between Canada and the US.
We always have this type of phenomenon where like $1 million house, when we were growing up, it was just like, holy smokes, if I can buy $1 million house, that is going to be like the epitome of success. Now it's just like, you know, that $1 million house is just like
$1.8 million.
you know, 2.5 or whatever it is. But the government, it became spending, like $1 million became
$1 billion. Yeah.
And so it was just like the ArriveCan connected companies, they're at like total of $1 billion worth of government contracts. They were just handing out billions.
The ArriveCan speaks to such a problem. You guys know me. I'm a pretty liberal guy. I vote liberal. I support liberal. I know you guys don't, but I do. But the fact that you support a party or you support principles doesn't mean you should be blind to incompetence, corruption, and the like. And anyone who looks at what happened with ArriveCan, and anyone who looks at what happened with third-party contracting over the past 3 years, anyone who could justify spending $1 billion on an app is partisan to a point where they have blinders on and shouldn't be listened to, because it should enrage every single one of us that our hard-earned money. Do you know how much money $1 billion is? It hurts. It hurts that ultimately we are going ahead and spending $1 billion on apps that can be devised by, you know, well, I don't want to go into it, but you know, I'm sure there's going to be some
Bangladesh for
people. Yeah, people that came all the way here to line up for shitty jobs that they could already have back home.
It's so frustrating, and it's particularly frustrating for me when people on who I regularly say, yeah, you know, I agree with your political persuasions and everything else, start defending things like this. There's no defense for this. When governments are in power for a long time, doesn't matter what flavor, they become old and ossified, and problems like this arise. And it is up to us, the citizens, to say, no, not on our watch. This ain't happening. This is not acceptable. I'm paying my taxes. Hell no. ArriveCan is one of those seminal moments.
Am I the only one who doesn't know what ossified means? I'm sure the audience has no idea.
Just old and crusty and
old and crusty. So speaking of old and crusty, you and I are about the same age, and I asked Ron.
You're not helping my Tinder prospects here, Darryl.
I apologize. I asked Ron the same question, and I've been pretty vocal about how I feel about the deterioration of our country here that we grew up in, that I feel from my perspective was extremely different to grow up in this country. And even a few years ago, quite honestly, it felt like a very different place. And now I see, and I don't know if this is true because it's on the interweb, but it says that Canada plummets from 5th to 33rd in global quality of life ranking. Right. And so I feel like when I see something like this and I talk to people, you know, close to my age, that we all kind of feel similarly. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I agree with that, actually. Look, first of all, it's called the information superhighway. So let's get that straight. The info web. Yeah, no, like, please. Or cyberspace. You can call it either one. It's fine.
Incredible information superhighway.
I saw it on MySpace this morning.
Look, that fall in quality of life is directly attributable to home prices. I mean, there's no question about it. It's directly attributable to home prices. I teach down at Toronto Metropolitan University. I teach a whole bunch of students, you know, and when I went through law school, I became called to the bar in 2001. When I went through law school, my cost was $2,500 a year, which meant I was able to work at Starbucks, or in my case, in a computer lab or something, and put myself through school. which meant that when I graduated, I was able to afford my first home. It was $325,000. It was in the annex of Toronto, and it was a semi-detached.
There was
I
no
like
Starbucks back then, bud.
No, whatever. I like doing it so much that I bought another one right up the street for $350,000. Because what the hell? I mean, yeah, interest rates were 5%, but there it is. And that's how I started my career. And my first job in government paid me $65,000 a year. Remember, I don't mind sharing this. I'll just tell you, this is how I got started. No support, no anything else. I mean, not that my parents probably wouldn't have supported, but that wasn't in the cards. This was me graduating with no debt. I got my home. Oh, actually, no, that's not true. My parents paid $25,000 for my just fully disclosed. Like, these were the scenarios. And then from there, real estate appreciation did the rest. I sold this home. I bought this home. I sold this home. I bought this home. I had a whole series of rentals and whatever it is. Voila, I went through the process. Now let's compare what happened to me in 2000 with what is happening to kids today. So I have kids who are at TMU who are now graduating $150,000 in debt. Why? It's not only the cost of schooling, which is atrocious. Atrocious. You want to go through law school, $30,000 a year. MBA is like $40,000, $50,000. I don't even know what it is. All of which is borrowed money. People throw money at students so that they just take these interest-free loans, but really what it's there to do is to indebted them for life. They then graduate. They come into a place where entry homes, not condos, are $1 million, $900,000. Parents are totally tapped out already because they've been going through these refinances and people have less money than ever before. And then they're told, well, thank you very much. Now go start a family as an indebted person. And we wonder why marital rates are going to 30, 33, 34. There's an endemic of loneliness. It's because people no longer can supply or pay for their own families. And this, by the way, isn't a Canadian experience. This is a global experience. But in Canada, because housing is such an acute component of this particular facet that makes life impossible, and because we had a larger bubble than most, we are experiencing acute pain in a way that others are not. Australia is too, by the way. Australia has the same sort of stats as Canada. But that's what's going on. It's unfair for Canadian kids. To their credit, the Liberals in their last budget identified the issue. They didn't do anything proper to address it at all. But they identified the issue, which is generational unfairness. They're right. We need to start caring about our kids again. We need to start giving our kids opportunity, and they do not have it anymore. They don't. And ask any kid if it's fair that doesn't have parental money. Ask them if it's fair. It's not. They can't move to our major cities. They can't get jobs. They still get a job for $60,000, $70,000. What is that? It's bubkiss in the relation to the costs that they have maintained. And as a result, our social contract is fraying.
Or we're accustomed to, even worse, right? Like, these kids are coming from lifestyles that are impossible to keep up, right? Especially without help. So you send them out into the wild, forget about the fact that the house is so goddamn expensive. They expect to have the best phone. They expect to have Wi-Fi unlimited. They expect to have a beautiful car. They expect to have good food in the fridge and, water when they're thirsty. And
yeah, but Darryl, can I correct you on one thing?
Please
That's not
do.
their expectation. We've all lived in a bubble of debt for 10 years where we've refinanced our houses in order to afford these same luxuries. This is a Canadian expectation that needs to be reset because we've been living on borrowed time. We have not been living on incomes. We've been living on real estate appreciation, and that appreciation is no longer happening. The piper is coming. What is it?
Pay the piper.
No, the what is coming due. There's an expression for it. Whatever. The toll is coming due, guys. And this is not just in younger generations. Younger generations have learned from older generations, which have sat there and said, we had a pretty good thing going on in the 60s and 70s. We had a lot of income here, and now we've created massive monetary and debt expansions, which are allowing us to maintain our style of life. But debt eventually comes due. So our young kids have learned it from us, Darryl. We are the problems.
You're right. It's weird because I walk outside, or when I'm driving down the street here in Toronto, all I can think is all these people are rich. Like, they have to be rich because they all have a house in Toronto. right? Everybody, but the truth is obviously that's not the case. But if you own a house in Toronto and you look at your neighbors, I mean, everybody's got to have some money around here, or else if they don't, this thing is going to really get interesting soon, because there are people out there for sure that have just been, like you're saying, keeping up with the Joneses. Their salary isn't keeping up with the Joneses, but their lifestyle seems to be. And now that it's refi time, it's like, oh shit. Like maybe they only have a $500,000 mortgage on their house that they've owned forever, right? Because they've been, tapping into it for years. But all of a sudden that 500,000, the cost of it just doubled or tripled for some people, right? And
it's hard to explain to people who are striving to reach new levels of wealth exactly how much of a fiction our world is. It's hard to explain to people how debt works, even though they can conceptually understand it. They think the person beside them, they hear about this person who sold a company for $10 million. And they're like, wow, so rich, without understanding that they gave away 95% of the equity, and the 5% that they do have is going to cover the personal debt that they've taken out on their home, which they don't have a penny. It's hard to understand how someone who's driving around in a McLaren or a Lamborghini or anything else has actually financed that thing. Like, it's just shocking, but there's not always, particularly amongst the extremely expensive cars. You might be dealing with the 1%, but say a BMW, say a Mercedes, a G class, whatever. All of them are fictitious debt. No one is walking around free and clear. At least very few are. And it's so misleading, because then it creates this impression that, geez, I want to get this too. And it just puts you into the same bubble. It's a weird thing, but 10 years ago or 20 years ago, there used to be a nobility to driving around in a beat up used Honda, because there were no car payments. And that was seen as the greatest flex that there was. That flex is no longer recognized or appreciated. The flex is you own a G-Wagon, but you don't really own it.
You don't have a rear
drive a G-Wagon
camera, or like one of the, when you back up, you don't have a backup camera. Like, what's wrong with you?
It's a very strange phenomenon that I think was enabled by people having endless access to capital through debt markets. But new reality has set in. If I'm correct, if TK is correct, and if real estate is to plateau for the next several years, we will all be brought down to reality by virtue of the fact that HELOCs are no longer available to us and debt bubbles no longer are increasing. And that will have its effect.
I think it's got the greatest effect on the younger generations. And so here's the best example. And I'm glad you brought this up, because it's really clear in our culture is those new immigrants come and they've got these, what we would consider frugal spending habits and, substandard living conditions and all this kind of stuff. But really, they look at us like we're crazy. But then those first generation, the children, they start getting born and they get assimilated into Canadian culture. And then they just become just like all of us. And it creates this issue, and it's this endless cycle, right? And we look at culture, oh, it's a cultural thing. No, it's Canadians are debt ridden. And that's just how we are. So I've been saying this for a while now, for at least a year, is that the best thing that can happen for my kids is that they go through some really tough times where they look at like Great Recession type of spending habits, so that they can kind of look at the whole big thing and say, this doesn't make sense at all. And I'm not going to participate in this economy because I don't have the benefit of taking them to another country or passing on my spending habits, because I'm a Canadian like everybody else. Right.
So I know sometimes, particularly with this show, you could do fart jokes or you could do like very serious, and you do both very, very well. So I'm going to go with a very serious angle in reaction to this for a second. No fart joke.
I'm going to try and throw in a fart joke. Okay. Be ready.
Look, guys, there is a common element in humanity which requires hardship in order to become a crucible, in order to become something worthwhile. It's true in our religious stories. It's like, the fall from Eden and the resurrection of Christ and the phoenix into the ashes, and every single story we tell ourselves every single time is this same story. You need hardship in order to substantively form into something of value. That is the story of life. No one wants people to go through hardship. I don't wish hardship on people. It's a terrible time. It creates death, destruction, the destruction of families. Like, it's a terrible time. And yet, it's also the enduring human experience that creates long-term value. We have not had hardship for a long time, a long time. And the debt bubbles of real estate have allowed us to avoid economic hardship for a long time as well. That is coming to an end. I do hope that we make it through the hardship largely unscathed. And I hope that we get the benefit of the hardship, which is a reformed societal matrix that ultimately, similar to what happened after World War II, comes out of it strengthened and ready to tackle the challenges of today's world. What I think we're seeing in so many areas, politics, economics, you name it, in the West, not in the East, in the West, is in fact the end cycle, the cycle where people haven't experienced that hardship for a long time. And now as we're entering into it, we will reconstitute ourselves as we always do. But we have a hard time ahead of us in order to do so. Sorry, no fart joke.
One of the things that I saw this week, and I think should play a factor in, well, plays a factor in where we are and should play a factor in where we are hoping to head, is that the average size home back in 1950 was 983 square feet. Likely had 4, 5, 6 people in it, right? If you fast forward to now, you're above 2,700 square feet. And I know from my personal house that there's a lot of space here that doesn't really need to be here. We don't need it. We fill it with shit all the time. But it's a waste of space, right? And I think most people have something similar, you know, like way too big a kitchen and an extra bedroom they don't need. And, you know, everybody's house for the most part is, I mean, look at Drake, for God's sakes. It's him and, you know, well, who knows how many little kids are in that house, but it's really just him and his son living there. And that thing is crazy.
His son's friends. That's what Daryl's referencing.
That's right. Friends, BBL Drizzy. But the point I'm trying to make is that there is a way that we can help reverse some of this, and that's by getting used to living in smaller homes, not like the dog crate condos, as Ron Butler says, but like, you know, back down to maybe a 1,200 square foot bungalow for 3-4 people, right? 1,500 square feet would be almost cutting the average in half now, right? While also reducing the cost of construction, I would imagine, by half. And that should have an effect, right? Can we do that? Are we able as a society to move backwards like that?
I mean, I think that we are collectively starting to appreciate that a lot of the mores of the 1960s and the 1970s are no longer applicable to today's world. So, you know, I was just speaking to my wife last night, and I was saying to her, why isn't there unlimited density or unlimited height along Yonge Street and Bathurst and Dufferin? Well, why aren't we taking our major corridors and just say, what is stopping us from saying, oh, you're erecting a 12-story building? Erect 28. Like, why? And then the answer was, because my wife's in real estate, an intelligent person, she said, well, it's because of the neighbors and because there's planning people and everything else. And, you know, we're the home of Jane Jacobs, who started urban planning. But is that an appropriate thing in an era where we can build to the sky? And where that makes for more affordability and makes for more product, should we still be NIMBYing our way on our main thoroughfares, as an example? You know, municipalities have been answering that very call, not necessarily in limiting the square footage, but in saying everything can be a fourplex. Let's go. Let's move. We don't care if you're Rosedale. Let's go. You know, these types of solutions are now becoming societally driven as we realize that the NIMBYism is having larger sustainable effect across a large swath for all of us. And we all need to collectively say, no, not on our watch. We need to change this. And I think that what you were seeing in the 60s and 70s, where, you know, environmentalism meant preserving your own tree instead of, as an example, preserving the planet, and where you cared about your neighborhood and then would, you know, and that was where all of your efforts went in. I think now collective efforts are now starting to focus on, well, collectively, how do we approach this? What does it look like from a city planning perspective? What does it look like from a global perspective with regards to global warming or anything like that? All of those factors are now becoming features of the way we collectively engage with our polity, which I think is a very, very helpful and healthy way of reforming a lot of the excess that took place in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in terms of our political plannings.
But do you know what it will do for the traffic, Mark? Like, honestly, do you know how badly it will affect traffic if we just build willy-nilly like that and actually
Darryl, don't
house
worry about it
everybody?
because the LRT is going to be finished by 2047. So you're good. You'll be fine.
Right. Okay.
I think to be honest with you, and you know, like I'm not building any condos, and I'm not, you know, on that development side. I'm just working with developers, and I'm on the outskirts. But I mean, I think we're making huge strides in the right direction. Like all these policies that they've been coming up with lately, I know they're not all effective, but I know that there's a lot of them that are going to lead to more development. I mean, having the density near the major transit service areas are definitely going to be the best place for those buildings. I agree. You know, why not just pick like Yonge Street or something like that? Well, that's because there's transit there, right? And why not just give them more density, which they are. And that there is like we got 300 cranes in the sky right now. I was talking to a guy who owns a huge crane company last night, and he told me it is booming right now. They are building, and that we are going to have over the next 10 years a lot of product that is going to come on the market, or that has already been sold, or that is going to be a purpose-built rental, or that is going to be there to be able to warehouse people, which is what Canadians do. And so we want it to happen today. We want, like, how come I can't see it? Why is there not a fourplex in my backyard? Give it 10 years.
Yeah, you're
I
right
really
about
do.
this.
I'm optimistic about this.
I think you're very, very, very right about this. You know, we're so down on the government all the time, and particularly these days. But the truth is, there's been a lot of substantive change where finally things are happening. You know, you may not like the feds, but what they did with regards to HST and rental product mattered. It moved the needle. It was something. It was something. Hopefully they'll apply HST relaxation to broad-based construction. There is John Tory was probably the last, I think possibly the last of the I'm not listening to anyone when he increased his DC charges by 100% just before he went out the door and decided to have an affair with whoever it was. But I am seeing municipalities start to implement real substantive change. Say what you want. I grew up in Toronto during the great times, and I never saw a freaking subway station built in my life. In my life. It's the same damn thing over and over. Now we have the Ontario line. Now we have the LRT across Eglinton. Now we have the Finch line that's actually coming in. We actually built the line to the airport. Like, say what you want. The needle is starting to move. It's painful because we all have to sit there, and the corruption is endemic in Metrolinx, and we just want to pull our hair out. But things are starting to change.
They're starting to change for sure.
Probably because of the show, mostly.
Mainly because of the show. TK said huge strides, and they're barely even baby steps.
They take like 10 strides, and one of them was a good one.
Well, that's one of them was a good one. It's like one step forward, 10 steps back. But Mark says, and he's right. Like, why can't we just do this, right? And so they do come out with new policies, and they do make it so that we can build more, but they miss the mark by so far, right? Instead of, say, like you're saying, 12 stories, and that's ridiculously low, but the policy that came out is for 6 stories. So you take all the streets that you just named that you were like, why the fuck? Like, why wouldn't we have 20, 30, 40 stories here? And they said, these are the perfect streets to put 6 stories, everybody. This place is going to be wrong.
Better than the 3 that they were getting before.
That's the thing. And that's why it steps in the right direction, but they're missing the mark by a mile because they
but the people who are coming into governments are starting to listen to the right people.
They're young.
The truth is that if you were in the 80s, good luck to you getting 6 stories. Good luck. You could have lobbied for 10 years. You wouldn't have gotten change.
2 years ago.
Right. I'm telling you that in the past 2-3 years, there has been, at all levels of government, there has been substantive change where people are saying, no, this isn't working. Yeah. And we, as policy makers, have to change this. It is a substantive change that is starting to take place. But again, these changes take place over 20 years. Like we have to pull our hair out because for the past 20 years, we've done nothing. And now we have to live with the effects.
Now we have to live with the effects. Gentlemen, it's unfortunate that we have to end the show here. It's been a wonderful discussion as always, but summer
It'll be our
baseball
last.
calls, and unfortunately, I have an hour drive ahead of me. Mr. Morris, always a pleasure, sir. Very
If anybody
informative
needs
as
the name of a
always.
good gardener, I have one on hand. So just email me. I'll supply you
Where
with
can people find you, Mark, to get your gardener's
I
information?
need the gardener bad.
Guys, I run legalclosing.ca. You can just look it up online. The be all, if I'll promote myself. We're awesome. Use us. There we go.
Agreed.
He is the best. He's everywhere. Everyone uses him, and he is a rare model on top of everything.
Guys, and you got it. You got to flaunt it.
He's got it all.
And you got it. He's got a flan. Mark, do us a favor and ask everybody out there to subscribe to the channel for us.
I will absolutely do so, gents. It's a pleasure as always.
Can you record that for us now?